Hi, my name is Zanana Akande, and so frequently I'm asked, how did you get here by doing something so ordinary as being a school teacher? And I'm here to tell you that the words that set you free can tie you up in knots. It's always surprising to hear myself described as coming from humble beginnings. I know what the words mean. It means my family was poor. Yet growing up, we never described ourselves as poor. Poor was not having any plans or any ambitions or not having high expectations. And we had all of that. We just didn't have any money. I was certain that hard work would cure that. Yet growing up in the 40s and 50s, the limitations to accessible work and financial reward were complicated by my gender and my race. Even when you fought past the factory and the office and back into the school, rare was the opportunity to lead the show, even at the school level. Women were there in the schools, often in the majority, but rarely in leadership. Having tried fitting in, and even pretending that leadership and greater responsibilities were things that you wanted only until you married, or unless you didn't. Disgruntled and impatient, I joined the ranks of the less acquiescent, more demanding women, pushing for our rights and greater inclusion in leadership. You know the names of some of the most publicized women in this battle: Betty Friedan and Laura Sabia, Margaret Sloan and Gloria Steinem. But there were also hundreds of women from the Federation of Women Teachers in Ontario and from many, many other professions and climes of life. We reasoned, we debated, we argued aloud and in print. We were even known to have cajoled, but rarely, and we were always right, or at least righteous. Practiced in the art of verbal opposition, Black women numbered among those who fought for women's advancement and inclusion in leadership. I was comfortable in that struggle. The tactic was familiar, aggressive, without pause or intermission. The language was assertive, but also familiar and clear, very clear. It was the language of my community. Gloria Steinem has publicly stated often that she learned how to advocate for women's rights from Black women who were experienced in advocating for racial equality in many community situations. It was interesting to note, and somewhat encouraging, that we had honed those skills out of necessity and because of our circumstances, somewhat inadvertently. Yet the words and the delivery held meaning for all women involved in the movement, regardless of their race. The terms and language of the movement became widespread. Research was abundant and used well to hammer home obvious conclusions and eventual acceptance of women's demands. Women had pulled together and collectively made real gains, important changes, such that eventually, but slowly, women were moved into leadership roles. It's quite a task getting this. Eventually, some women were well positioned to effect the occupational promotion of many of their sisters, to aid in their upward mobility, to increase their financial independence, and raise their status. Success. At last, the sisterhood was powerful. But there the eruption began, and the movement became divided by class, by race, and by fit, as in not the right fit. Haunted by the rhetorical question, very familiar in our community, ain't I a woman? But undaunted by our general omission, Black women relaunched the demand for equal rights as part of the Black agenda. And as soon an extension took over the goals of the movement and made it our movement. The movement of women working in a multitude of roles that came from everywhere. We encourage women from factories to hospitals, from banks, from hairdressing salons, to move into our movement. And knowing that sometimes, sometimes accepting their job limitations, some of them were so embarrassed to be there that they, in fact, made us all promise not to share their presence with others. We knew that many of them had left school in the middle of high school. Some of them had graduated and went to work in commercial roles. Others felt that they did not have those skills, and so they took hairdressing courses. We knew that few of them had the opportunity to go to university, and we knew that bringing them all together was a bit scary, but bring them together we did. It was a movement that was so accepting that they, in fact, began to feel comfortable. Some of them asked for support in learning the things that they needed to know to move further into more responsible jobs. As a matter of fact, my husband ended up being the math tutor, and I thought that some of the women took greater interest in him than their tutoring, but we won't. we postponed worrying about that until they moved forward. We also had to accept the fact that we were not teachers, that we, in fact, were women supporting other women. And so when people shared with you what they did not know, you had to fight that feeling that I'll immediately tell them what to do or I'll give them classes, because some of us who were teachers were very accustomed to doing that. What a movement it was. And it was built on a slogan. The slogan was, "One step higher with money." One step higher with money. And some of those women had retired today. They've retired from the positions that they earned through their work. They retired, some of them as union leaders. One of them started a series of hairdressing shops where she hired some of the other women who also weren't good at math. I often wonder about the financial endings in that situation. Some of them moved into offices, and it was, for them, one step higher because they never anticipated they'd be there. But Some of them became, you guessed it, school principals and supervisory officers, and they're here tonight to tell you, yes, indeed, the words that set you free can tie you up in knots, but you must redefine them in order to free yourself. Thank you.